Jerome Powell and the Fed are at it again. Let's see what they're up to. Welcome to today's episode of SRT Live. I'm your host, Sean, with the Sean Richard Mortgage team here at Guaranteed Rate. Thank you so much for joining me today. And we've got a relatively light week this week, but it ends with an absolute blockbuster of a report. So we're going to get into that. But first, let's do week in review. So looking at last week, very light week last week, not a lot of information that we really need to cover. We did get the jobless claims, as we always do every Thursday. Remember, jobless claims are individuals filing for unemployment for the first time, and then individuals renewing their unemployment claims. And that's broken into initial filings and continuing filings. So we had the unemployment claims staying low last week. Market analysts were expecting 195,000 new claims. We only got 190,000, and this was on top of the 192,000 the prior week. So what this tells us is that the labor market is staying extremely strong. Now, we've got the JOLTS report, which is a job openings report, coming up tomorrow, and that's going to give us some more information, but I'm going to talk a little bit about why that could be a little bit misleading, and I'm going to hit that here in just a bit. More importantly, we heard from Jerome Powell today. So Jerome Powell spoke, and really first off, these were prepared remarks, and he focused heavily on the state of two things. One is the labor market, and two is just the overall inflation level. Inflation has been stubborn as of late. We saw inflation start to come down for probably a good 45 to 60 days, and then we've now seen inflation tick back up. So one thing in particular that Jerome Powell said is that the Fed is not opposed to accelerating the speed of rate hikes. They are prepared to do so to combat inflation. And we'll dive into that a little bit more in a minute. But this is bad news for the mortgage rate market. Inflation is the absolute enemy of interest rates on the mortgage side. As inflation rose, we saw interest rates rise to 40-year highs. Or inflation was at 40-year highs, and it pushed mortgage rates to some extreme levels as well. So we really want to see that inflation come down. Now, with that being said, Jerome Powell and the Fed, the reason they're increasing the Fed funds rate is to combat that. So hopefully over time, we'll start to see inflation come back down, and we can see some relief in the mortgage market. Now, with that being said, let's look ahead to this week before we get into our weekly focus. Tomorrow, pretty big day. We get the ADP payroll report. This is a precursor to Friday's Board of Labor and Statistics jobs report. And then we also get the JOLTS report tomorrow. Again, this is the job openings. And then Thursday, as always, we get the jobless claims, unemployment claims. And then Friday's BLS report and accompanying unemployment rate. So we're going to get those this week. So let's really dive in to what is our focus looking forward this week and over the next few weeks. The one of the big two items is going to be the labor market. We've seen the labor market stay extremely tight in the face of everything that's going on. Inflation has started to come down, but the labor market has remained extremely resilient. And the hurdle with the labor market being extremely resilient is we end up with more job openings than there are people to fill the jobs. So what does that mean? That means that employers are competing for the same worker. When employers are competing for the same worker, that drives wages higher. So if you're an employee looking for a job, that's great news, but be aware that on the big picture, the macroeconomic picture, when those wages are driven higher, that's wage pressured inflation, and that is contributing to the inflation that we're seeing across the entire economy. And that inflation is what the Fed is working hard to fight. So Friday's Board of Labor and Statistics jobs report is going to be a massive, massive report. It's actually being called one of the most important jobs reports that we've had in recent years, not months, but years. Remember, the last jobs report last month, market analysts were expecting about 188,000 new jobs created for the month of January. and we got 514,000 jobs created for the month of January. And this was an exceptionally large beat to the upside. So, what we want to understand is, was this an anomaly, or was this just the strength of the labor market coming through in the jobs report? So, this Friday's jobs report is going to tell us a lot about whether that was just an anomaly or if this is going to be a trend. Now, the other aspect of the labor market is that JOLTS report that we get tomorrow, job openings. And the anticipation is that we're going to have about 11 million job openings. Now, this can be a little bit deceiving because what we don't know about these numbers, we don't know whether some of these job openings are for the same position. Remember, in an environment we have a lot of work from home positions, then companies can go out and they can hire the position for somebody in Texas, in uh, New York, in California, Oregon, anywhere across the country. So, what companies may be doing is posting the same job in different markets to attract different individuals. And if that's the case, then the quantity of job openings is going to be quite on the high side compared to what it actually will be. So we don't know exactly how accurate the job opening numbers are, but we do know that 11 million job openings indicates that the labor market is staying really, really strong, and that's part of the concern of what the Fed has right now. Now, the other major component that we're focused on is accelerated rate hikes. So again, Jerome Powell came out and said that they are fiercely focused on getting core inflation down to 2%. And to do that, they essentially have to crush demand. And consumer spending has stayed extremely robust in the face of the interest rate increases from the Fed. Now, quick reminder, when the Fed increases the Fed funds rate, that doesn't impact mortgage rates directly. There is an indirect relationship, but it does not have a direct impact on mortgage rates. So when the Fed increases the Fed funds rate, mortgage rates do not rise. In fact, the opposite should typically be true in most cases. When the Fed increases the Fed funds rate, the interest rates that are directly affected are going to be other consumer lending products like auto loans, credit cards, personal loans, lines of credit. Those types of products are going to have a direct impact, or going to be directly impacted by the Fed increasing the Fed funds rate. So it's getting more costly to spend. It also impacts businesses borrowing money. So all of your corporations out there that operate heavily leveraged, they do a lot of borrowing to run their business. The cost of that borrowing is going to get more expensive, and some companies are going to pass some or even all of that cost onto the consumer, which is obviously going to bring inflation up, or is going to bring prices up, and that is going to crush demand. When demand wanes, inflation will come down. When people stop buying, then prices will be forced to come down to be more competitive to entice consumers to buy. So the Fed is focused on crushing demand, getting the core inflation rate. So core is with and not including food and energy, because the Fed believes that those are much more volatile and are not directly impacted by their monetary policy. The other item that kind of goes along with the Fed rate hikes is consumer spending has been at extremely high levels. Consumer credit in particular has risen to some of the highest levels that we've ever seen. And so we're seeing consumer credit debt rise at dramatically large paces. This is concerning because if we do fall into recession and we start seeing wages come down or other job losses, job cuts, credit debt could pose a problem across the entire economy. So these are things that I'm watching, my team is watching, and we want to bring these to you so that way you can understand how they're impacting the economy and ultimately how this all translates to the housing market. Ultimately, as the Fed is able to accomplish their goal of destroying demand, inflation will decline, and that will bring mortgage rates down as well. I expect to see a reasonable amount of progress on mortgage rates over the next 3 to 6 months, but it's never going to be in a straight line. So we've seen a recent tick up in interest rates after a little bit of a decline, but I do think that we're going to start to see that decline again by a little bit here over the next several months. We just need to start seeing that inflation tick back down. So that's what we're focused on this week and for the near future. Keeping an eye on the labor market and watching what the Fed does with their the Fed funds rate at their next meeting a little bit later this month. That's all I've got for you today. If there's any questions that you have, feel free to reach out to me at the contact information here. You can always leave comments below. If you're checking us out on our Powerhouse private Facebook group, thank you so much for being an amazing part of our community. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you've got up-to-date real estate and economic news at the tips of your fingertips, at the tips of your fingers. All right. Thanks so much for joining me again for SRT Live. This is your host, Sean, with the Sean Richard Mortgage team here at Guaranteed Rate. Have an incredible rest of your week. Take care.